they'll be able to catch up on the recording after that. So if there's no objections, thank you to the electeds or on the line. As Nan said, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I believe we have the update from Atlanta Public Schools top on the agenda, so I can turn it over to Ms. Erica Long to begin, and then we'll take questions from the members once she's done.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for your time today and allowing us to come in and speak with you. I'm happy to pass it off to our superintendent, and I know that several of our board members are here as well.
There we go. I was just asking for permission to unmute. Thank you so much, Madam Senator. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone. I am the very proud superintendent of Atlanta Public Schools, Dr. Lisa Herring. It's my pleasure to present to you, and thank you for your time and patience as we start. Our goal today is to take the time to give you some updates on Atlanta Public Schools and our legislative priorities. We do have a presentation that will help guide us. I am sensitive to time, and so I do want to make certain that we get through our presentation while also allowing time for questions. It is our presentation to both the House and Senate legislative delegation, and I'll go ahead and start. We are here today to update you on the components of our work at Atlanta Public Schools, and as I shared earlier, to highlight our priorities. The purpose, of course, is to make certain that you are aware of ours as it relates to the 2022 session of the General Assembly. I want to highlight very briefly for you our Atlanta Public Schools mission, vision, and guiding principles, what we've put in place with our administration over this last year and a half, relative to what we call our APS 5, our focus in partnership with our board on student outcomes focused governance, pivoting out of COVID-19, letting you know a little bit about where we are with facilities master planning, and then an update on our Center for Equity and Social Justice, and closing with those priorities. I do want to acknowledge that our board chair, Madam Board Chairwoman Ishay Collins, is here with us this afternoon, and I've noted that there are several other board members also connected. I see Mr. Estevez. I also want to note board member Kenyatta Mitchell, in addition to board member Tamara Jones, and I want to make certain that I haven't overlooked any of our board members, board member Jennifer McDonald as well, and that if any others can guess that. I'll move from this slide in just a moment, but I think there's no better time than the present to highlight our emphasis on our mission statement. Real quick, back to that mission statement that emphasizes that Atlanta Public Schools remains committed to creating a caring culture of equity, trust, and collaboration so that every student will graduate ready for college, career, and life. Our 4 guiding principles remain grounded in equity, ethics, engagement, and excellence. That's a critical part of all that we do, and it's important for me to mention that. As we've started this school year, we've also moved into what we call the APS 5, and these are the 5 evidence-based practices that we will prioritize and that we will implement in all APS schools to increase student outcomes and fulfill our equity commitments. I hope that you will note that you will hear me mention quite a bit the word equity, not just by chance, but by design, because our board has been extraordinarily clear in those commitments. In brevity, the APS 5 captures 5 key areas: a focus on data and data analysis and accountability. Of course, our core business of teaching and learning, so that's APS 5 item number 2, curriculum and instruction. There's no time like the present, as we all know, in which we need to also focus on the whole child and whole child well-being. To that note, our 3rd item in APS 5 is whole child and intervention implementation, as well as a system of support. We've all become connected, just like this Zoom. And so our 4th bucket within the APS 5 is tied to personalized learning, where the 5th captures our unique efforts towards signature programming to strengthen the signature programming of all of our schools across the district. That is how we reference what we call the APS 5. And we have been strategically focused on working to support those 5 areas within our schools. As we continue to move forward, I want to also take a moment to talk about what our board committed to in this past year, knowing that if our core business is teaching and learning, our board has been clear about our commitment to ensuring our connectivity and our open transparency around student outcome-focused governance. So what does that really mean? It allows for us as a school system to maintain our focus on the most important work, a continuous improvement framework around student performance. It allows for the Board of Education in partnership with the Council of Great City Schools to ensure that I, as superintendent, along with the administration, maintains a transparent sense of accountability relative to student performance, student outcomes, communication and collaboration, unity and trust, and a continuous improvement model. In executing a student outcomes focused governance model, what we realize is that we have a critical responsibility to focus on specific goals and guardrails to ensure that the work is done. You see here on the screen just an overview of that, but it is important to note as that guides us over the next several years as it relates to school performance, student performance, and the work of our administration to ensure that all of our schools are successful and that we're transparent about what that process looks like. Beyond that, I also want to take a moment to note that we are also extraordinarily appreciative of the next body of work that happens within APS. Now, as I move through our student outcomes focused governance, I do want to make certain that I highlight what our key goals are. Our goal 1 is tied to literacy proficiency, the percentage of students in grades 3 through 8 scoring proficient or above in reading as measured by Georgia milestones. We've worked to pull baseline data to help us move into a guiding pathway for ensuring that we're monitoring student literacy proficiency. As you all may know, given the disruption of COVID, we had our last most comprehensive data report from August 2019. Our goal is to increase that performance for our students from 36.9% in August 2019's most recent report to move up towards 47% towards August 2026 or even higher. Our goal 2 is numeracy proficiency. So again, ensuring that we're focusing on effective reading skills for our scholars as well as our numeracy skills. So we focus on, again, here, the percentage of students in grades 3 through 8 scoring proficient or above in mathematics, as measured again here by the Georgia milestones, and our current baseline of 35.0% in August of 2019, with a trajectory of moving towards 45.4% in August 2026.
That's good. Thanks so much.
We continue to monitor and support our post-graduation preparedness. So in goal 3, we're focused on our graduation rate. And then of course in goal 4, we maintain a strategic approach to monitoring our students' work as they move in through and to high school towards graduation. We look forward to increasing the students who participate in several of their current options, whether it relates to college or career readiness. That's based on IB, International Baccalaureate, advanced placement options, dual credit, ACT or SAT, and work-based learning as they prepare to enter into post-secondary options without need for further remediation. We believe that that too is critically important. In addition, we're also proud that we recently had an increase in our own graduation rate. I highlight our student outcomes focused governance work because it is the work that's most important, and it is what we believe we must remain accountable to our school board as well as to our greater community. Because we are also in tune to the realities as it relates to pivoting out of COVID, I thought it was important to take a moment to just appreciate where we are in Atlanta Public Schools as we continue to pivot out. We are extraordinarily in Atlanta Public Schools appreciative of the support that we've received from every level of government, including our state leaders, to help us safely educate and serve our students, staff, and schools during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, there's a simple truth. We've all stepped into what is a new normal, and that this pandemic may or may not move swiftly, but we are so much more better prepared than we were just a year and a half ago. As we work through the current stage of COVID, we are really focusing on the whole child supports plan. We're implementing this plan of support through 2024 with expanded supports and services to students. If you've been aware of what those supports are, or if you yourself are an APS parent, you may be aware of our summer school supports that we've done, the summer academic recovery that started this past summer, serving approximately 11,000 students, in addition to our school schedule adjustment to ensure that there have been interventions in place. And more so, I'd like to take a moment to just also acknowledge our emphasis on trauma-informed care practices, crisis prevention and training for staff, and additional enrichment opportunities. We also believe, as I mentioned in the APS 5, the strong foundation relative to mental health is extraordinarily critical. In the fall of 2021, we onboarded additional mental health counselors and therapists. This included an increased allocation of school social workers and school psychologists for fall of 2021, and to also secure on-call school social workers. In APS, we've also provided a 24-hour crisis support line as the fall started in this past year. And we onboarded a universal mental health screener for our scholars, where we're able to identify where there are additional needs of support for students. And when we see higher levels of needs, we talk directly to our parents to ensure that there is a plan in place for our scholars. We believe that that's important and a part of the ongoing work. Before I speak briefly to our strategic facilities master planning for APS, I just want to make certain that I continue to emphasize not just our deep appreciation for the full support that we've received as it relates to COVID mitigation strategies, but also resources and goodwill and support from all of you to ensure that our staff and that our students are well. And just like each of you, we're looking forward to the full pivot out. In the interim, we continue to work closely with those who are in the health field to make certain that our decisions are made in sound judgment as well. Atlanta Public Schools is also in the process of moving into what we call our strategic work relative to our facilities master planning process. We've been intentional around engaging the community in this space, and we've been doing this work since 2019. We did encounter some brief interruption during the COVID pandemic, but we are excited that we've moved now with more intentional engagement with the community. We have engaged the community since 2019, and we are analyzing our current facility utilization as well as demographic projections. We are working towards a recommendation to the board on how our district facilities can best serve our students over the next 5 and 10 years. And part of that is also taking in and analyzing the data relative to our projected enrollment trajectories. We are encouraged in that regard. Here you'll see not just that process, but where we currently sit. We do acknowledge that we had some impact relative to student enrollment as we've moved in and out of COVID, but we're also encouraged around rapid growth, particularly in certain clusters as we continue to move forward. As it relates to next steps, we sit in February, but in March, we'll be sharing scenarios for our board to review, as well as continued engagement with the community. We'll have a May-June phase of improvement for recommendations, and that'll move us also into the fall. And finally, before I close with acknowledging our work towards our legislative priorities, I want to take a moment, if you're not aware, to just remind you that this fall we also launched in Atlanta Public Schools our Center for Equity and Social Justice, where that is led by the district's first Chief Equity and Social Justice Officer. Our officer works in complement with the city's Chief Equity Officer and equity officers across the city, the state, and of course on a national level. We believe that this has been critically important to make certain that, again, not by accident, but by design, all of our work is approached through the lens of equity. Our center has allowed for us to expand our connection to all departments and divisions, and we've moved pretty expeditiously to make certain that this was a priority in the operations of our organization. We focused this past year on pedagogies and curriculum and resource equity. And as we move into this academic year and subsequent years, our work will expand as it relates to governance and leadership, talent management, and of course, supplier diversity. That is not to suggest that we're not doing certain bodies of work now, but as we do things to scale, I simply want you to have in mind how we're working to ensure we do it well. That also being stated, we've been intentional around our outreach within the community as it relates to equity work. One of our celebrations has been in partnership with the City of Atlanta when we recently announced our Atlanta Child Savings Account program that allows for us to open eligible Atlanta public school kindergartners with initial seed deposits so that they can understand the process of growing savings and also work in complement with families to also teach finance education. To that same end, we are focusing on our low and moderate income students with an account savings of $1 to up to $499. We recognize that this is a targeted population in which we can, in partnership with the city, make a difference. And of course, we also recognize that at the conclusion of this process, our goal is that our scholars are able to leave in partnership with the city with savings accounts of $500 or more. Of course, we're excited about that level of partnership, and our Center for Equity and Social Justice has been a lead as well in that work. As I speak to that, I'd like to now close with identifying what we've stated as our legislative priorities for the Atlanta Board of Education for this year, for 2022. To that end, I'd like to start with what we've identified and what has also been approved by our board. Number one, provide adequate, stable education funding, including continued full funding for QBE and updating of the school funding formula. Number two, protect the APS property tax base to support quality instruction for all students. This includes the advocating against legislation that supports the creation of a city of Buckhead. As superintendent, I do want to take a moment and thank those who have been lead voices in this work. We understand that this is critical and that there is an impact that does touch APS in multiple ways, financially, operationally, as it relates to staff and also potential divisiveness within our communities and schools. So we maintain our support that we are not supporting the movement towards the creation of a city of Buckhead, but a full Atlanta. Item number three, to maximize district autonomy and flexibility over fiscal management issues. Four, continuing with our prioritization of early childhood education so that we can provide aligned quality programs to all of our scholars, but as early as possible. And number five, monitor recommendations of legislative study committees on issues relevant to K-12 education and interest of school-aged children. In addition to that, we've urged the adoption of approach to education legislation that supports district autonomy and flexibility and restores the EIP flexibility previously granted to charter systems. Strengthening the teacher pipeline and teacher quality by providing resources for recruitment and retention. We've often been asked, how has that looked throughout the course of the pandemic? We are proud that APS has been able to retain a high volume of our teachers and that we've been able to move through that support and retention throughout this pandemic. So this is clearly an important area for us to be able to strengthen an ongoing pipeline of teacher quality and support for recruitment. Number 8 focuses on prioritizing the continuity and consistency throughout K-12 curriculum. And as I mentioned earlier in our APS 5, we're very focused on what we need to do by way of data and analyzation to ensure that we're focused on our core business of teaching and learning. Item number 9, secure and monitor state support of students, schools, and families impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Strategically support legislation inequities across the city of Atlanta, and monitor the legislative reapportionment and redistricting process as it impacts the Atlanta public schools as well. I'd like to make certain that we are also clear on where we are on certain House and Senate bills. I think it's important for you to hear where our support is, where we stand neutral, and where there is opposition. House Bill 385, Teacher Return to Work legislation, and Senate Bill 361, Less Crime Act, we stand in support. SB 357, the School Choice for Military Students, as well as the Parent Bill of Rights, SB 449, our position remains neutral. I've mentioned already, as it relates to Senate Bill 324, the creation of the city of Buckhead, APS stands in opposition. That also holds true for HB 60 and HB 8 and for House Bill 60 and House Bill 999 for vouchers. We stand in opposition. And then, of course, the banning of transgender youth from sports participation, SB 435. We, again, in our effort and our commitment to equity and within our own district policies, want to be clear on our opposition and stance there as well. Finally, as it relates to Senate Bills 375, 377, House Bill 1084 and 888, that we believe that these are divisive concept bills and we stand there in opposition as well as 492 elected school superintendents, there's opposition. Legislation limiting the ability of school districts and boards to implement COVID mitigation efforts is without question a space of concern. APS has had the flexibility and autonomy to make critical decisions in partnership with health officials, with the state, and of course, throughout the city, in addition to CDC and all of our health experts. That has allowed for us to be able to maintain strong mitigation efforts. We are concerned that any interruption of that can, of course, create a different level of conflict. So on one hand, while we are encouraged that we are pivoting out of this pandemic, we maintain the need to be able to have a level of decision-making that is best for their local schools and communities. I believe that's the end of the presentation. And as I mentioned earlier, our board chairwoman Ishay Collins is on with us today, as well as several other board members. You'll see our board representation as it relates to government affairs, in addition to the superintendent and of course, Ms. Erica Long, our senior advisor. We have 3 other board members that are critical leaders in this work. Board vice president, vice chairwoman Aretta Baldwin, board member and legislative liaison, board member Katie Howard, and the other board member and legislative liaison is board member Jennifer McDonald. We're excited to have both board member Howard, board member McDonald, and board member Jones, who have recently joined our board with our recent swearing in January. This concludes our presentation. I know that we all find ourselves somewhat crunched for time, so we are sensitive to that. As superintendent, I am thankful for the opportunity to present to you. I look forward to continued engagement with each of you in both our independent and collective capacity, and we are collectively available for.
Superintendent Herring, thank you so much for that presentation and for making the time to join us today. I make no secret that I'm not just an elected official, I'm an APS parent. So I want to commend the board and you for everything that you've done for the past couple of years, the remarkable safe return to school for our children and the work you've done to keep them safe, but also making sure they have a strong learning environment. I am blown away by the passion and compassion of the teachers and administration at our schools. So just on behalf of the delegation, I want to share that as well. I'll start with a question, and then members, if you have a question, if you want to raise your hand or let me know in the chat. But looking at your legislative priorities, I know questions that I'm getting from folks about things like Parents' Bill of Rights and divisive concepts and so forth are questions about what the transparency is for school systems and making sure parents understand what their children are learning about and what curriculum their children are learning. I know all I have to do is open up the backpack that comes home every day. I hear a lot from my teachers directly letting me know exactly what my student is working on. But is there an overall philosophy at APS about how you make sure parents have access to understanding what's in the curriculum and what's on the syllabus for their children while they're in school? Superintendent Herring, I think you might be muted. One moment. Sarah, can we unmute the superintendent? Y'all apologies while we try to get this muting system worked out.
There we go. Not a problem. There's certainly patience there. But no, thank you for the question, particularly relative to the transparency of our curriculum and what we've made available and how parents can have additional access to information at the start of each school year. And of course, as we move from the close of the school year to the summer, that information is always made available through our schools, even within our district website. We want to make certain that there's clarity around our curriculum standards, our standards of excellence around what we believe is critical for teaching. Our principals are able to provide frontline information in that regard. I appreciate that you noted, even as a parent, whether it's going into your child's book bag or having a direct conversation with a principal and or teacher, anything relevant to curriculum and instruction information is something that we believe must be easily accessible for parents. You can also find information on our district website. As I mentioned earlier, our transition to student outcomes focused governance also allows for an even broader platform of sharing around not only what we're teaching, but how effective that process is going to take place. You should anticipate even more transparency in that format as we move throughout the course of the year throughout our board meetings. But from a day-to-day standpoint, please know that the schoolhouse, your school principal, that's a first point of contact, as well as your school teacher, a syllabus, and or any type of information relative to our textbooks or platforms for student engagement allows for parents to have immediate access to student information.
And if you don't mind, Dr. Herring, I could just point out one sort of procedural issue with a lot of these bills that talk about transparency and talk about engagement from families, but what they're doing is setting up a tremendous administrative burden for our principals and our district leadership to basically serve as customer service representatives and respond to these complaints and these filings and these issues in a way that will take away from the time they so desperately need to lead our schools and our classrooms.
Thank you for that thoughtful response. I think that also helps equip us when we're talking to constituents about sort of transparency and curriculum and whatnot. I would like to open up to any other members have questions, and I'm going to be transparent myself and say, because of where I'm sitting, I'm having a hard time seeing participants. So members, if you'd like to unmute yourselves to ask a question, we can open the floor for questions for Superintendent Herring or for Ms. Erica Long.
There's a hand raised.
Betsy, Representative Becky Evans from the Atlanta DeKalb.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Superintendent Herring, for your update. It's so good to hear from you, and thank you for your. I regret I missed part of your presentation. I'm gonna go back and listen to it, but I'm very glad I was able to hear about your key legislation and issues. And I just wanted to run down where we are with the ones that I know about. I think you know this, but like the HB 385 did pass the House. So that's over to the Senate now. And then the Senate Bill 357, we just passed that out of the Education House Committee. So I think that's going to happen. And we did pass out of the Education Committee HB 60. Of course, most of your, I mean, and that was actually a bipartisan thing, but it was, I did vote against it. I stand, for public dollars for public schools, absolutely. But it was not voted strictly along partisan lines. And I really don't think the elected superintendent's going anywhere because that's a constitutional amendment. Right now, so I guess on that HB 60, what we really need to work on is, we will work on this, absolutely. And they'll work on it, we'll try to.
Betsy, what is HB 60?
HB 60 is a voucher bill, and it will it applies to a much broader base of students than the Senate Bill 47 that we passed last year. And there's a list of eligible criteria, students who would be eligible to apply for the apply for the tax credit. You know, it's the tax credit, it's the state portion of the education formula for the tax credit. But one of the most alarming reasons for qualification that a student can apply is if they attended a school that did not have in-person learning for over a semester. So basically it's targeting all the Atlanta metro schools that were virtual for a year. So
Very
that we
dangerous.
do, you know, and your education groups, I'm sure you're members of, you know, are all opposed to that bill and are working hard here. But if APS wants to make a stance on HB 60, you know, it's now in the Rules Committee of the House and will and could come to the floor any day. I think it's actually passed out of rules. So, and my understanding that 999 won't move forward now that 60's passed, but that's, you know, they could bring up 999 too. It's the same bill sponsor. And that's really bad because that's after 6 weeks of being a student. School, they could apply for a voucher. Whereas HB 60, you have to have been a student at least a semester, and I think for a whole year. The other thing I want to say is that HB 1084 is probably the divisive concepts bill that is moving forward. That sponsor, Will Wade, has made significant changes, and today he did meet with you, and I have given him other changes from a group that spoke against it. So I've asked for a copy of the sub and I want to send it to you all to see if we have any more feedback, because of course, we will oppose it no matter what, but if we also want to give them, if there's any language that can be inserted to make it less dangerous, that would be good too. And there has been some progress on that. It's not as draconian as 888 was. So I will do my, Erica, I will, if I am able to get an online version of the bill as it stands now, I will send that to you this afternoon. What was the other? And then, yeah, and then we haven't had the Parental Bill of Rights yet. And my understanding from that is that we will receive the Senate version of the Parental Bill of Rights. That's what I'm understanding. That, yeah. So that's good that you're neutral on that. That's good. You've read that. That's good. Okay. And then I did want to let you know that we did pass a House Bill 1217 yesterday at a committee, and now it's basically a technology, it's called the Student Technology Protection Act, but it's basically just an update on school servers, on school devices, having filters for, and we ended out supporting that in committee. So take a look at that, but we have like our attorney that's, Matthew Wilson, we didn't, and BWIN, we decided to support this bill. It was really just an update of, because those laws hadn't been updated since
So I'm going to say thank you to Representative Evans for giving an update. If you can still hear me, I just want to communicate that.
Yes, I think we heard you, Superintendent Herring. Thank you. Oh, it's not a good technology day today. Thank you. Other members who have any questions or comments for School Board or Superintendent Herring while we're on the topic? And I would ask, Erica, if you don't mind can we have a copy of the PowerPoint deck as well? This is a good cheat sheet for us as far as legislative priorities and just an update on the school. So thank you for that.
I'll paste that link in. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, thanks for that really excellent and thorough presentation that the superintendent has shared with us. It's excellent. You had the ribbon cutting picture of opening up. The full name of the initiative did not stick with me, but it was equity. Superintendent Herring, if you could tell us what that's going to look like, what it's going to be, where you're going with it.
Yes, ma'am. And let me restate the name of it. So it was the Center for Equity and Social Justice. So in the summer of my arrival, which was 2020, as I established our senior leaders, I did get the support of our board to put in place a Chief Equity and Social Justice Officer. Our board has already been proactive since 2018-19 with establishing an equity policy, which for many urban school districts at times can be a challenge to get in place. APS has been ahead of the game in that regard. We were committed to then making certain that from the lens of accountability, Equity and Social Justice Officer helps to ensure that through the divisions of school operations, whether it is teaching and learning, academics, finance, facilities, etc., all decision-making protocols are also guided through an equity lens so that all students get what's needed for them to be successful. So essentially, we've created a department of individuals who are tied to everything from auditing and supporting policies, making certain that even as we conduct business, we are thoughtful about how we exchange in that body of work, and also to make certain that we're publicly reporting out what we're doing, even in the space of performance, as well as teaching and learning, curriculum, training, etc. It's not a short-term investment, it is ongoing, it's long-term. We've established an equity and social justice community that is tied to both community representatives that our board members have identified. We have student voice as well as teacher voice, as well as our faith-based and non-faith-based community leaders who have been interacting with us for this past year. As I shared earlier, we believe that this is an appropriate stance to ensure that no child or no teacher or no part of the learning process is omitted. And when it is, they help us remain accountable in that regard. I hope I answered the question. It is both a department and division, but those are some key areas that are covered.
And how widespread now in the system is the work that you're doing on the emotional facets of student health and well-being? Because that's newer to the scene than a lot of other pieces of approaches to education, and it's very, very promising.
Let me speak to that in several capacities. As it relates to social emotional wellness and well-being of our students, we have a full curriculum that is implemented on a daily basis throughout elementary, middle, and high school. Even during the season in which we were virtual, part of the protocol was to make certain that there were practices for checking in with students, as well as communicating to families when there were any types of concerns that were identified. We've taken the time to invest in the training of our teachers around the social and emotional learning curriculum, in addition to making certain that extended resources have been put in place. From a resources standpoint, we invested, particularly with our CARES dollars, into additional school psychologists, school social workers, school nurses. That's important to note. And we will continue that work as it relates to social emotional wellness. I reference what I call the APS 5, but the whole child well-being and intervention component is a part of the work that we do. So when I reference it, I'm not talking about just a singular class or a school, but the entire school district. Another component of that was something that we did not have in place, which is the universal screening that allows for us to assess for mental wellness for students K-12. We've done our first implementation of that, and we've been able to communicate to parents where we saw any level of concern. And then I think it's important to note that finally, we haven't just thought about the well-being of our students, we've thought about it for our teachers as well. We've recognized that there has been a need for additional support beyond the training protocols, but just for their own well-being. We've onboarded across all of our clusters, counselors on demand, in addition to our EAP, Employee Assistance Program, in addition to wellness check activities that occurs throughout the district and our schools every month. I could go on in that space, but I won't. But I do want to emphasize that without question, has been a priority of our board and of course of this administration.
The other thing, and I know we don't have all day, but you all have flagged it and we're very concerned over here. And that are these these concept bills and this critical race theory pot stirring that is quite in vogue over here. And I suppose at this point you're doing watchful waiting. I mean, anybody working in education in the state of Georgia had best be on high alert right now with these sorts of efforts moving forward, and what we've heard how it's played out in some other states. But
that's correct. But I do think it's also important to note that, and Erica, if I omit anything, please feel free. But most recently, at our most recent board meeting, our board did also come together and establish our own resolution in opposition of the efforts that have been put in place relative to critical race theory. And we've also been intentional about that, to make certain that APS has been heard in that regard.
thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. Yes, ma'am.
And Erica Long is a recognized and talented voice for APS and available at the drop of a hat. One text out and she's right there with you with the latest information. So we really appreciate how well APS is represented over here at the Capitol, and really welcome the input of all the individual school members and applaud their service. This work is not easy, but it's critically important, and thank you so much.
Oh, and thank you. And then again, I stand with you in recognizing Mrs. Long. She is our front-facing representative every day during session, and we are grateful for her leadership in that regard. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, we're gonna wrap up this rich presentation. Apologize again for the delay, and we've gotten terrific information, and we'll look forward to being in touch in a robust way with APS. We're proud of you, and we're there for you, and we know you're there for the children. We just got that great news that it looks like the Buckhead City bill is torched because the Speaker of the House has just come out and joined the Lieutenant Governor who runs the Senate in saying, no, we are not this bill. We're gonna support the mayor to move forward and preside over the matters of the city, and wish him the very best in his efforts. So that's terrific. That's why Betsy, you see that big smile on Betsy's face. She just shared the tweet. But we can all rejoice with that, and with that we will thank and again appreciate all of the educators and policymakers from the world of education that have joined us today. Thank you so much, Superintendent Herring, our first full face with all of us that we're privileged to have with you. And we want to turn now to the other agenda item. We never knew we were going to be on the phone half a day, but hey, nothing ahead but a Super Bowl, right? So Kenyatta Mitchell, again, a talented and experienced person that we've known over here at the Capitol for years, working on policy, building relationships. And I have to say, I was beyond thrilled to, when the mayor put her as the director of the government relations. And we're so happy, Kenyatta Mitchell, to have you with us today. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. First off, good afternoon to my personal senator, Chairwoman Orrock. Chairwoman Holland, the delegation, all the folks who are on this call. I am Kenyatta Mitchell, the Intergovernmental Affairs Director for the City of Atlanta. And for our Mayor, Andre Dickens. First off, before I get started, I'm going to make this presentation a little short just because I'm backed into, of course, meeting after meeting, right? But I would be remiss not to say thank you to APS, to all of my partners, to everybody who has been shoulder to shoulder fighting with me on the Buckhead bills. I am beyond grateful. The mayor is beyond grateful. Like, I feel like I'm tearing up. It's just been work. So thank you all. I'm so grateful. So I'm going to stop there before this becomes like weepy cry, right? I want to briefly mention our legislative package, which was passed under the previous administration. I can send y'all all copies, but all these things are well known to everybody in the delegation. So I'm just going to go over them really quickly. The first is absolutely protecting our existing City of Atlanta boundaries. This deals primarily with the Buckhead de-annexation, but also with the integrity of all municipal boundaries statewide. You know, this happened to our friends down in Stockbridge, Georgia. Of course, they were able to beat that away. And, you know, Atlanta's now, it could be any city next. So thank you all so much for fighting with me on that, fighting with the mayor on that. And we want to make sure that residents are happy to call themselves citizens of the City of Atlanta. So we have work to do. You know, I'm not going to sweep that under the rug. We have a lot of work to do, and we are working hard to ensure that both we keep our city boundaries and the people who are in those boundaries are proud to be with us. The second is Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. The City of Atlanta opposes any legislation or action that seeks to change the ownership, operations, governance, or even diverts our funding related to the airport. Again, very, very grateful that this has not shown up, but it's something that can appear at any time. So I appreciate everyone's diligence. The next is housing affordability and court records. We want to enable property tax deferral programs for lower income homeowners. We all know in Metro Atlanta that homeownership is part and parcel and paramount to civic engagement and being a full-blooded American citizen of this great country. We want to ensure that our lower income folks have that same opportunity. You know, I know I have a bunch of fighters on this call who fight for this every day, but we want to just call it out again. We also want to create a state law talking about COVID, sealing eviction records of an eviction where the tenant has prevailed and they've satisfied the terms of their consent agreement, and any eviction that's occurred during the COVID-19 pandemic. These are one-off situations that should not follow a person for the rest of their lives. We want to ensure that people are able to start over again in these hard times. The next item I want to talk about is voting rights. We all know that voting is a fundamental right. The City of Atlanta supports any legislation or action that expands access or opportunity for all eligible residents. The next one is really important. I've heard this quite a bit from a lot of people, which is open meetings. Simply, this continues a COVID era amendment to the Georgia Open Meetings Act that enables local governments to meet remotely without an emergency declaration. This change, you know, as we see now, I think we have 43 participants on this call. We've never been able to have this much participation on in-person meetings. It provides better access, reduced costs. It reduces the workload and travel demands of the members and of our city employees. So we think this is just a phenomenal option, a phenomenal opportunity. Sixth on my list, but definitely not sixth in my heart, is public safety. This will require law enforcement agencies that enforce a law in a municipality to file traffic citations in that municipal court. Why this is an issue is we have a lot of organizations, agencies who work in the City of Atlanta and file traffic citations, but that revenue does not come to the City of Atlanta. It puts a burden on our court many times, and we're not able to recoup that revenue in an effective manner. We can definitely talk about this more offline. We can definitely talk about this in a later meeting, but I just wanted to bring this up. And finally, our seventh option is ghost guns. We want to amend the state law to prohibit ghost guns. For those of y'all who don't know what a ghost gun is, it's a homemade gun made from easily obtained items that can be purchased with no background check. That is our 7 items. I will stop here if there's any questions. I wanted to run through that pretty quickly because I have a hard stop. So sorry about the speed at which I went through.
I'm not seeing any questions in chat. And
Okay.
are there any members of the delegation that have questions? We'll get this list
Yep.
in our hands, of course, and very helpful overview. Let's see, there's one ghost guns. Yes, Representative Roberts, exactly.
Exactly.
And we're, of course, fighting these atrocious guns everywhere bills and permitless gun carrying and all that over here day by day. It's unattractive, doesn't even begin to describe what they want to do to the gun laws. Any questions yes, Betsy?
And I'm sorry if you said this, Kenyatta, and I missed it. I cut out for a minute. I know that on the Senate side, they passed out the Less Crime Act, I think today, which is aiming to better equip law enforcement for reducing crime. I'm assuming the city is in favor and is supporting that legislation. I'd like to see us move it forward.
Not only are we in favor, but we wrote a quote supporting the bill. So you are absolutely right that we're in favor of that legislation.
All right, we'll be looking out for it in the House.
Okay.
Has anyone brought anti-ghost gun legislation this session yet?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not aware of it, but hey, the hopper's open.
Well, I looked at it before session, and I think Roger Bruce brought it maybe last term.
Mhm.
And so I may just see if he wants to renew that and get it in the hopper. So I'll check with him.
Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent. All right, we want to let Ms. Mitchell get to her next meeting. We thank everybody who's apologize for the inevitable delays that occur over here. There's always somebody sticking a spoke in the wheel just when you think you're running down the road at a good speed. So we appreciate everybody's forbearance and please accept our apologies. And we'll hope this has been just excellent information as far as I'm concerned, and a great participation, and wonderful to have the whole school board here, so many city council members, county commissioners. And if you have anything else to add, Kenyatta, take the mic and then you can sign off.
I can sign off?
Yes, I said, if you
Oh,
have
sorry.
anything else that you might add before you jump off.
No, again, y'all, this has been the work of my life. I've been at the Capitol. This is my 20th year. I've never worked so hard for any legislation in my entire life. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I can't thank y'all enough for the Buckhead bill. This has been part of the reason why I haven't been able to spend as much time with y'all individually as I'd like to. So thank you all. You're gonna see my little face more often.
Yeah, and how timely that in the middle of our COA discussion, this news breaks, and you can go into the weekend a little more lighthearted than we typically feel around here.
Yes.
Over here at the Gold Dome. And thanks for all the work. Every FaceTime that I'm looking into, or that you all have weighed in and helped make the difference on this. And we certainly cannot say enough for the mayor's leadership. I know I can imagine that he's ebullient right about now. And we're going to thank you, Kenyatta, and look forward to more rich exchange and work together and in the trenches.
In the trenches.
Fighting for democracy. Appreciate you, and we'll excuse you certainly. And I know the school superintendent has had to go on to the rest of her busy agenda. Do we have? I see 2 chat notices in the chat. Yes. Just thanks from Katie Howard, and Representative Bruce does have that ghost gun legislation.
I didn't see that. Okay.
But Kenyatta, you can certainly be excused and give the mayor our warmest regards,
I will, thank you.
as always. Tamara Jones, thank you, one of the new school board members. And are there, for the good of the order, is there any old business or new business? We will remind people that currently we've been on a schedule of every other week. We expect that we will have, because we swap off with Fulton. There are going to be some Fridays that we and Fulton may do back-to-back meetings, just in terms of moving things forward. As far as the school board, and Erica, you can clarify this. People have asked me where the school board of Atlanta's lines, the new districts, and my response has been they're seated, just had an election, and those seats are going to remain that way for the next. You want to take it from there, Erica, on the.
Well, if you all will remember, thank you for that. And I know it can get a little confusing because our setup is different from some other school districts. Our school board district lines within our charter are directly tied to City of Atlanta council lines. For example, our school board district 1 is made up of city council districts 1 and 2. So as those districts go and change and move around, that would impact our school board districts. So as a school system in general, we are agnostic over how city council districts change from place to place. And obviously there's been tremendous growth in the city these past few years. But under our charter, there's just that direct tie-in between the makeup of our school board district, and they're each made of 2 city council districts. And yes, this past election was the first one where we're going to have staggered Board of Education seats. So half of our board members were elected to 2-year terms. And our legal department is working with the city's municipal clerk's office just to make sure that that's taken into account, because half of our board will be up for re-election in 2023, the other half in 2025.
And is it your understanding from the city that they're on a different timetable on drawing those maps?
That's what I've been told. I had a conversation with some folks over there within the past week. I believe they have started that process, but it is our understanding that there's a portion of it that has to be passed by the legislature and signed off on by the governor. But we have been told that they have begun the work on that.
Yes, and that's not going to be something that's done during the current legislative session.
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
Just looking at all that has to happen, that seems realistic.
That's right. Yeah, because we're right now up against the deadline of when maps have to be done, and the city doesn't have to do its maps, given that they just elected and are serving in those seats.
Mhm.
Do we have our speaker lined up for next time, Betsy?
So we may be changing that. I think our hope was to get the update from MARTA at our next meeting in 2 weeks and have a joint meeting with Fulton County, so all of us could hear from MARTA and Transit at once. But we just heard today there's a possibility that we might be postponing that. So I will let everyone know as soon as we hear.
And any local legislation that we're aware of, Atlanta delegation legislation?
I have not seen any come through the House. House members who are here, if you have local legislation you'd like to discuss today, let us know. I have not seen any come through.
Betsy?
Chair.
Yeah, Betsy Evans.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Is Representative Dreyer on this call right now?
No, he's not on the call.
Okay. Because I asked him about some legislation that he was exploring about raising the homestead exemption and tiering it to incomes.
Right.
And I'm very interested in learning more about that. And and in supporting that. Of course, I want to hear the school board's feedback, but he felt like he said he'd done a lot of work and that protected the school board. Schools to get their taxes, but to also help offset the cost of these higher taxes for our lower income families. So I do hope we'll hear about that and move that legislation forward this session.
We may have an update on that from Jen Jordan. She may know more. Senator Jordan?
Yeah, we're working on it. Obviously, things have been a little crazy the last couple of weeks, so I apologize for us not being more proactive on that end. I think we're just trying to get these maps done, which
Meet those
hopefully
deadlines. Yeah.
let's meet the deadlines, and then we can kind of go to the homestead exemption stuff. So, but I appreciate you asking about a representative.
Thank you.
So next week will be a Fulton County delegation meeting. Is that correct? Senator Jordan as chair of that?
Yeah, we're going to do that, or we can do joint. I think what we've talked about in the past is doing Atlanta, Fulton, but then of course compressing when it makes sense in terms
Exactly. Exactly. So
of, when
balls
it's
in,
cross jurisdictional. So.
yeah, and balls in your court, but we'll all be working. Teamwork makes the dream work, and that's what we'll do. All right. Is there any other, for the good of the whole, any other comments by delegation members? And if not, we will call this meeting into adjournment and go get our junk food, right, for the big game on Sunday. Thank you all. I know how hard you all work, and we just appreciate it that public service is still in full bloom. And we, Commissioner Hall, will be wanting to have a Fulton County commission, be hearing from you all certainly in the next very short while. Look forward to that opportunity. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks, everyone. Anything
Thank
else for
you.
the good of the? All right, well, we are adjourned, and everybody have a wonderful weekend. It's 69 degrees outside, they tell me.